Hey guys, so I am still in recovery from healing from my dental surgery, so if I talk a little weird at times, I apologize, but I feel good enough to get a video out for you today. Anyway, you guys really loved the highest rated horror movies I don't like from IMDb, so today we're going to be talking about the lowest rated horror movies that I love from IMDb. In order to make the list, the movies have to have at least 1,000 ratings on IMDb, and in order to make my list, it has to have a rating of 5 or lower, 5 out of 10 or lower. I actually did the same video using Rotten Tomatoes 2 years ago, which the lists are pretty different. There's a couple that overlap, but if you are curious to hear more about lowest rated horror movies that I love using Rotten Tomatoes, I will link that video. And honestly, it took me a minute to go through this list to realize, like, when I started to look at this list, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna find any on this list that I actually like or enough to make a video. But silly me, I love a good bad horror movie, so I found 25. And I'm not arguing that these movies are incredibly made or are perfect horror, like really well done movies, but I am arguing that they all have redeeming qualities in some way. Even at the very least, were entertaining for me personally. So before we jump into my list, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of different types of inspiring classes for creatives. You can explore new skills, strengthen existing passions, or discover new hobbies, or just get lost in creativity on Skillshare. One class that's really piqued my interest personally is How to Make Dope Low-Budget Films by Julian Klepper. There's a lot of different types of movie making, or like indie films, or even using your iPhone to make movies. Lots of different types of classes like that on Skillshare. I don't know if I should talk about it yet, but one thing that I really want to do this Halloween is create some short films. I don't know what's gonna happen with that. I haven't written anything out. Obviously, we're approaching Halloween. Now, we're thinking much smaller than what this class specifically teaches, but I'm hoping to get a few tips through this process and learn from this class how to write characters and conflict, casting and shooting and all of that, and post-production and things like that, just to see a different perspective on movie making, and hopefully I can get some insight from this class. Skillshare is, of course, just meant for learning, so that means there are absolutely no ads, and there are constantly classes being uploaded on a regular basis, from photography to video editing to creating films, even lifestyle entrepreneurship and freelancing. So the first 1,000 people to click the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare premium membership. After that, it's only around $10 a month with an annual membership. So we're going to start this list off by starting with the higher rated movies with the 5 rating, which are still low rated in my opinion, and work our way down to my favorite lowest rated horror movies based on this list from IMDb. Also, I will have a link to the official list down below if you want to go and look at movies on that list that maybe you love, and leave a comment and telling me what movie is generally low rated that you love. First up, Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones. This is one of my favorite Paranormal Activity movies actually, and I did a whole ranking video with spooky astronauts. I will have that linked up here, but I think The Marked Ones is such a unique and original movie to fit into this franchise because it's the only one that doesn't follow like a rich white family in like an affluent area, and I feel like it just adds so much to the universe of Paranormal Activity. I love all of the time jumps and the twists, and even the horror elements I think are pretty good, and I think The Marked Ones is often written off as like one of the worst ones of Paranormal Activity, which I don't think it deserves. Chernobyl Diaries, taking place in Chernobyl, of course, and this is like a vacation horror where everything goes wrong for the tourists, which is a really great genre in my opinion. I don't know if I included it in my ranking of all the subgenres of horror, but it's a really great subgenre of horrors, the vacation tourist horror. Now, Chernobyl Diaries definitely has its flaws both in production and morals, because it's a little bit offensive to the events that took place in Chernobyl, and I fully recognize that, but it has remained a comfort movie for me personally. Next up, Blair Witch, the 2016 sequel, if you will. Now, I love anything to do with this franchise, so I'm a little bit biased here, but I am actually shocked based on the horror elements in this, in addition to like the absolutely horrifying, terrifying last 15 minutes of this movie. I'm actually surprised that it's rated this low. And the ending of this movie scared me so much in the theater. I don't remember the last time a horror movie really affected me or really made me scared, especially in the theater. And this is definitely one of those memorable moments where I was petrified watching the last like 15-20 minutes of this movie. Also, we recently played the game Blair Witch. Incredible. Highly, highly recommend. Next is Silent Hill Revelation from 2012. Some would consider that this is one of the worst sequels ever made, I would say. And yes, the practical effects aren't really there. They're very much lacking a lot of CGI, and it doesn't look as good as the original, of course. And you know, the monsters aren't as great, but we kind of have slim pickings for Silent Hill movies, and so I will take what I can get. And I'm about this close to starting to watch some playthroughs or some streamers playing the old Silent Hill games, or buying them for myself and trying to attempt to play them myself. I'm not much of a gamer. I love video games, but I can only watch them. I suck at playing them, and my partner will not play the Silent Hill Silent Hill games. So I'm like this close to either doing it myself or watching some playthroughs, because I need the Silent Hill ambiance. It's one of my favorite kind of universes or franchises, I guess, in the horror genre. Should I stream me playing Silent Hill? That would be fun. Last up for the rankings under the 5 stars is The Haunting from 1999. This is the oldest movie on this list, and this stars Liam Neeson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Owen Wilson and Lily Taylor, all very familiar faces. And this one is definitely much more of a thriller, drama, suspense movie, and very minimal on the horror elements. So this would be a great movie if you are a newbie to horror, or you're just not that interested in gore or, you know, super scary elements or anything like that. Great for beginners. It is a little bit on the cheesy side, but I think it's still really entertaining and very underrated. Okay, now we're going to be working through the rankings in the 4-star category. So first up, we have Await Further Instructions from 2018. I've talked about this a lot on my channel. I love any chance I get to bring this movie up because I really love it. I was actually very surprised to see it ranked so low on IMDb. It makes me a little sad. This is an original sci-fi horror, and not without its flaws, mind you, but I fully enjoyed the concept of this movie and some of the visuals of this and the simplicity of this movie, because it's very unique and the sci-fi elements are minimal, but it's just enough to create a lot of tension and suspense and horror in this kind of just singular location. Next up, Texas Chainsaw 3D from 2013. This is technically the 7th movie in the franchise, in the Texas Chainsaw franchise. Let me know if you want a ranking video for this franchise. I liked this movie, and I'm a little surprised. I mean, I feel like modern remakes of classic horror never really bode well. I don't know what it is, but same thing with like Blair Witch. They just never get good ratings when a modern movie does a take on an older horror movie that's considered a classic. Think about Rob Zombie's Halloween, for instance. And I won't lie that one of the major factors of why I enjoyed this movie is like a group of friends partying at an inherited ancient house, and it's just a setting that I really enjoy and a plot kind of story that I usually enjoy. But plot-wise, it's not super fantastic, but definitely does not deserve a 4.8 rating. Like, ouch. Next up is a movie I never hear anyone talk about, and that is Don't Blink from 2014, also at a 4.8. This is a very trippy, like, again, more thriller type movie than horror. I would say good for beginners as well, but the setting is really the best thing that it has going for it. The atmosphere and everything, the tension, is just like such a classic suspenseful type movie. Next one was so shocked, absolutely shocked that this was so low on this list. Like, I am baffled. Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight from 2020. This is the most recent one, I think, on this list. And I was so surprised. This is a super fun, self-aware horror movie that was released on Netflix last year. And I think a lot of people saw this movie and thought of it as like really surface level for some reason, even though it's very self-aware. I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of cliches in it, but if it's self-aware, I feel like it could be done right, and I feel like this movie was done right. I mean, it has like minimal horror. It's not one of those where you're gonna be scared watching it or anything like that. A lot of it takes place in the daytime, which that's not saying much anyway because midsummer. I mean, again, my bias comes through a little bit because it's a bunch of teens stranded in the woods at a camp while a killer is, you know, stalking them and killing them. So, you know, that is very much my kind of movie. I recognize that. But there's so much more going on with this movie, and the killer is so original. And while the killer itself, I would say, isn't the most original, like there's similar things that we've seen in the past, but the story behind it and everything is just amazing, and the reveal of all of that was so incredible in my opinion. Next we have Pulse from 2006. This is a very early 2000s type movie, and it's actually a remake of the 2001 Japanese original. And this is actually written by Wes Craven, and a lot of you guys kind of dog on me for never talking about Wes Craven. I guess I never do. I don't know what it is. So this stars Kristen Bell and is actually like a technology-based horror movie. Again, great genre. I love a good tech horror movie, and this follows college students, and while there is a lot of cheese in this movie, I would say, I mean, it does feel like an early 2000s movie, but when I first saw it, I did think it was actually pretty scary. I'm really into the supernatural kind of stuff, and the atmosphere of this is actually really good. It is rated PG-13, so that doesn't mean anything to me because I love a good PG-13 movie, but this might be a really good beginner movie as well because there's not too much gore or anything, and the supernatural elements are actually really good, in my opinion. ABCs of Death. I was really surprised that this is rated low because, like, what are you rating it on? There's 26 directors. There's something for everyone in here. What are you basing your rating on? Which one? This is an anthology style horror movie, so I guess it's not going to be for everyone. There are terrible ones in this movie, but there are so many good letters because every letter represents a different director and different short film, and they're all different styles and everything, so you just never know what you're gonna get next when you're watching it, and it's really fun to guess what the letters stand for, but do be warned that some of the shorts are actually very disturbing. Shrooms from 2007. This is like a movie that's so bad it's good. Like, the first time I watched it, I think I might have even reviewed it way back in the day, and I don't know if I even liked it, but there's something about it that grew on me, and now I own it because it's just one of those like 2000s trippy kids, not even kids, people going in the woods, group of friends going into the woods to look for psilocybin mushrooms. Obviously this causes some trips to happen, and while I am not actually really into drug-based horror movies, or like, you know, that subgenre like Climax, I think it caused so much anxiety in me. Midsummer also has a layer of this as well. It's one of my biggest fears. But this one is so cheesy that it doesn't like cross the line for me. Like, there are scenes of the drugs and the trips and everything like that, but it's nothing that causes a lot of anxiety in me. So it's just enough to add a little horror element to it for me, but not enough to where it like triggers my anxiety about it. I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. So this is not a movie for everyone. I've talked about this semi-recently, so I'm not going to go too into it, but it is an artistic type beautiful horror movie, and no one can really argue that it's not beautiful. Like I've said in the past, it's visual poetry, so it's not going to be for everyone. And that's why I like it personally, is the writing in it is some of the best writing I've ever seen in any movie, and the story itself isn't really fleshed out enough for it to be like perfect, so I kind of get why it's rated low because, you know, it's artistic. It's not going to be for everyone. Black Christmas from 2006. This is rated a 4.6 to me, the only acceptable Black Christmas remake. Sorry. Obviously not as good as the original 1974 Black Christmas, which is one of my favorite 1970s horror movies of all time, but the remake definitely has its own charms for me, and it does feel like an early 2000s movie. Even the cast to me screams early 2000s. Like, it came out I think the same year as Final Destination 3, which is iconic, and a lot of the actors from that were also in the Black Christmas remake, so for me it's just very much in that era, which is one of the reasons why I love it. Next up is Rings from 2017. This was obviously kind of a reboot sequel, and I love the introduction of modern technology in it because that's kind of a question that, you know, it was never answered up until Rings, is like, what would happen in today's world if we encountered Samara, you know, or like the Ring videotape or something. And I honestly think the story's really good. I know that's going to shock a lot of people because obviously the original Ring is my favorite movie of all time, horror movie, so it might be surprising that I love Rings so much, but a part of it is a bias because I love anything to do with the franchise, and seeing Samara on the big screen and everything was such a good experience, but I genuinely think the story's good. So, next up is another recent horror movie that no one really talked about. I talked about it a little bit in one of my recap videos, Death of Me from last year. Rated a 4.4. Wow. This is another fun, like, tourist vacation type horror movie taking place in Thailand, and it's a really interesting premise to me, and I kind of put it on randomly because I saw it on Netflix, and I was like, that's sure, I'll try that. And it was actually a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to get like a really cheesy kind of B horror movie, but I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much I liked this movie. Next up, you're just gonna have to forgive me for this one, The Gallows. I agree, it deserves a 4.3 rating. That does not make it any less enjoyable for me. And my relationship with The Gallows is an interesting one to me, because the first time I watched it, I hated it. I thought it was so bad. I saw it in theaters, but then I started getting a craving to watch it, and now I own it on DVD. So it's like, you know, we have a weird relationship, but something keeps pulling me back to The Gallows. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's teens in a high school breaking in and it's supernatural. That would explain a lot. Again, the next one, I agree with the next two, I agree with the ratings. They deserve the low ratings. Cabin Fever 2 Spring Fever, which is a direct remake for the original Cabin Fever, of course. But I think it changes it just enough to make it feel like a really unique and original storyline, even though they are technically directly related. It's a completely different movie. The gore, just as, if not more, disgusting in this one. Actually, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it's more disgusting, definitely. So if you like teen screams and body horror, I would recommend Spring Fever. Yeah, The Bye Bye Man at 4.2, agree, hard agree. However, this is another movie that had to grow on me. I just didn't appreciate its charm the first time I saw it, you know? Plus I had like a really terrible theater experience, and I think I just hated the whole thing all around because of that too. But to me, it's entertaining. I don't know, it's not great, you know? It's not one of the best horror movies ever made, but it's a lighthearted kind of fun movie, and sometimes I put it on. I don't know, I can't explain it. I don't know why I like this movie, but you know, something about it has me going back to it. Next up, VHS Viral, which you guys saw in my DVD collection. I know I'm missing VHS 2. I don't know why I only own the first and third of the trilogy. And I would say Viral is definitely the worst sequel in the franchise, or the worst one in the entire trilogy, but that doesn't mean it's all terrible. It's an anthology, so there are, you know, individual stories that I think make it good. I can kind of understand the ratings, and I'm glad to see that neither of the other two VHS movies are rated so low. I think my favorite one is the second one, ironically, because I don't own it, but definitely it's on my list to get. Next up is another one I've talked about kind of recently, I think, is Asylum from 2008. This is gonna be one where I agree with the ratings. 4.1, absolutely. It's definitely one of the worst on my entire list, and I'll warn you right off the bat, don't expect a masterpiece with this one. I mean, college students in an abandoned asylum turned dorm room supernatural. You see why I like it, you know? It's very predictable, and the story isn't great, and the horror isn't even great, and there's a really awkward like shower scene that I don't understand, but to me it's so bad it's good. Next up, we have Blair Witch Book of Shadows. I know, it's definitely a controversial opinion. A lot of people hate the sequel. I think part of the reason, I can't believe I have two Blair Witch movies on this, and I can't believe both of them are rated so low. They don't deserve that. I think it's my bias towards the franchise as a whole. I love the original, and you might be asking, well, if you love the original, why do you even like these sequels or reboots or whatever? I don't know. I will admit it is a terrible sequel to the original, not gonna lie. I love this movie as a standalone movie, not really in the Blair Witch universe, but I think it's related enough, and it just, I don't know, it has its charms, but it also has its flaws. But I can't deny that I didn't have a good time watching this movie, especially with the nostalgia like flooding the screen, and literally every single scene like came out in 2000. So it's just like the perfect era for me, in my opinion, for a horror movie to take place. I mean, you guys know what's coming next. Haunting of Molly Hartley, thank you. If you're new here, I gained a lot of new subscribers from my video with CZ's World. So if you're new here, this is the movie I'm kind of known for on this channel, which don't let that deter you. Please don't unsubscribe now because of this movie. It's just kind of a running thing on my channel. You know, it's one of my guilty pleasures, although I don't like using that because I genuinely like this movie. It's very, bad in a great way. What makes this rating hurt a little bit more, rubs a little salt in the wound, is that The Exorcism of Molly Hartley is actually rated higher than The Haunting of Molly Hartley, which is objectively a way worse movie and a terrible sequel, one of the worst sequels I've ever seen in my life. It's rated at a 4.6, and The Haunting of Molly Hartley is at a 3.9. Are you kidding? So we're down to the last two of the lowest rated horror movies that I love. If you guys want to take a guess on what these might be, you might be able to guess. Well, maybe not. Prom Night remake from 2008. This one is questionable on this list, I would say. I'm not super in love with this movie. It's not amazing to me, but I think it's the overall concept that I really like because it's prom, it's high school, it's a slasher. I just think they go really well together. And it's just another movie that's so bad it was good. And I just feel like 2008 was just a year for cheesy horror movies, I guess, because Haunting of Molly Hartley, we got Asylum. It's just the year that all these movies came out that were so bad that they ended up being good. Now, Prom Night Remake doesn't obviously have any real similarities to the original because it is a remake, but it is, you know, it's a predictable teen slasher movie from the 2000s. So you know what you're getting, you know what to expect. And finally, the lowest rated horror movie that I love, Fear.com. From 2002. This is rated at a 3.4. This is the lowest one on the list that I could find. I agreed that none of the other ones were good. I mean, I haven't seen half of them, but you know. Again, it's just the nostalgia in Fear.com with this one. I just cannot resist it. This is another technology type horror movie where this website kills you after 48 hours after you log on. And it's very Ring-like, if you ask me. They're not similar enough to where I would say if you like The Ring, you should watch Fear.com because you're probably not going to get the same enjoyment out of it because The Ring is objectively better. But it just has like kind of a similar concept and kind of a similar atmosphere to me. And they both came out the same year, so it kind of makes sense. 2002 was just like the weird, like supernatural type horror movie atmosphere. I don't know. And I do kind of agree with this rating. It is a little too low for me. I would put it more at like a 5, but because the acting is the worst objectively, I think, in this whole list, but I absolutely love the atmosphere and the concept of this movie. So there you have it, my 25 lowest rated horror movies that I love. Let me know what yours are. What are some that are generally lower rated that you genuinely love? Let me know if you've seen any of these ones and if you agree or disagree with me. I know I'm gonna get a lot of people disagreeing with me on some of these, but I think you can see that all of them have their redeeming qualities. They all have their little charms. But anyway, let me know what your favorite lowest rated movie is, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.